The first thing Everett Kane noticed was the smell of fresh bread. From across Granville Street, the windows of Canaan Harbor glowed against the November dark the way a lighthouse might, if lighthouses served osso buco and charged $42 for it. He could see the silhouettes of diners bending toward each other over candlelight. He could see the bar lined with people who had made reservations 3 weeks in advance and felt good about themselves for it. He could see his own name, etched in brushed brass above the entrance, catching the wet reflection of the street. He stood across from it in a borrowed parka that smelled like a storage unit, wearing a wool toque pulled to his eyebrows and 4 days of real unshaved stubble, because the costume consultant had said fake facial hair would look wrong in certain lighting. In his chest pocket, folded twice, was a note he had received 9 days ago. No return address, Vancouver postmark. One sentence typed in plain font on plain paper. Your restaurant stopped being for people a long time ago. Everett had tried to throw it away. He had set it beside the recycling bin in his Yaletown condo and gone to make coffee and come back to find himself reading it again. He told himself it was a disgruntled ex-employee, an anonymous food blogger, someone who had been put on a wait list and taken it personally. He made himself believe that for 5 days. On the 6th day, he called his operations manager and asked her to pull the incident reports from the last quarter across all 4 locations. She had sent them over without asking why, which told him she had been waiting for him to ask. On the 7th day, he had read them carefully. On the 8th day, he bought the parka at a Salvation Army in New Westminster and kept the receipt in his wallet like a small confession. His father had opened the first Canaan Harbor 23 years ago on a Tuesday in November, almost the exact same date. For a building on Robson Street that had room for 11 tables and a kitchen the size of a generous bathroom. Gordon Kane had not come from money. He had come from Cape Breton with a culinary diploma, a $10,000 loan from his sister, and a single belief so simple it embarrassed Everett now to think about it. Anyone who sits down in my restaurant sits down as a guest, not a customer, not a revenue unit, a guest. That distinction had mattered to his father deeply. Everett had scaled it into 4 locations, a James Beard nomination, a McLean's feature, and a recurring spot on every Best of Vancouver list since 2019. He had also, somewhere in that scaling, lost the thing his father had meant. He crossed the street. The hostess looked up. She was young, maybe 22, and she had the practiced warmth of someone trained to make the first 4 seconds feel personal. When she saw Everett, parka, toque, the general suggestion of a man who might have slept outside once or twice recently, the warmth did not vanish. It simply rearranged itself into a careful neutrality that was somehow worse. "Good evening," she said. "Do you have a reservation?" "I don't. I was hoping you had a table." She glanced at the screen, then back at him, then past him at the room as if calculating something she preferred not to name. "We're fully committed tonight, I'm afraid. Walk-ins are quite rare on Fridays." Behind her, Everett could see 2 empty two-tops along the far wall. He looked at them. She noticed him looking. "Those are held for late arrivals," she said, the explanation arriving a little too quickly. "I don't need much time. Something hot. I can pay." He pulled out the folded bills he had brought. Not many, and damp from his jacket pocket. She looked at them the way people sometimes looked at things that embarrassed them on behalf of the person holding them. Before she could answer, a man appeared at her shoulder. Thaddeus Rourke, general manager, 41. Strong reviews, efficient, well-dressed, and possessed of the particular talent for managing awkwardness that had made him very successful in hospitality, and Everett suspected, very difficult to live with. Everett had signed his performance bonus 6 weeks ago. Thaddeus looked at the situation in the way efficient men look at situations, quickly, neutrally, and with an immediate plan. He did not ask Everett's name. He did not ask if he was cold or hungry or had somewhere to be. He simply applied the plan. "Can I help you find something tonight, sir?" "A table," Everett said. "We're not able to accommodate walk-ins this evening. I'd suggest trying Davy Street. There are a few places that might be a better fit." A better fit. Everett had written that phrase himself once, in an internal brand document about guest experience. He had meant it to describe the difference between a casual visitor and someone who had reserved in advance. He understood now how it could be used to mean something else entirely. "I'm not looking for a bar," Everett said. "I'm hungry. I'd like to sit down." A man near the host stand waiting for his coat had begun to pay attention. His partner tugged his arm gently. A server passing with a tray of amuse-bouches slowed almost imperceptibly, then kept moving. Thaddeus lowered his voice. "Sir, I think you'd be more comfortable somewhere else." That sentence moved through Everett slowly, like cold water. He had heard it, or its relatives, in other contexts, from a hotel lobby concierge when he was 24 and backpacking through Quebec City, from a car dealership in his mid-20s, when he had not yet learned to dress for how he wanted to be received. From the invisible architecture of rooms that communicated, without anyone saying it plainly, that you were not the intended occupant. He had worked hard enough and long enough that he had mostly stopped hearing it. He had never heard it in a building with his own name on the door. He was about to speak when a voice came from just inside the dining room entrance. "Table 6 is open." He turned. The woman who had spoken was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, and the kind of face that had decided some time ago not to perform patience it did not feel. She was carrying a tray of water glasses with the focused efficiency of someone who did not waste effort on unnecessary movement. There was a small rip at the hem of her apron that she had folded over and pinned without quite fixing. Her name tag said Margot, but it had been made for someone named Margot S., the last name worn to illitability. Thaddeus turned to her. The look was not loud. It did not need to be. "Table 6 is reserved for the Hellman party," he said. "The Hellman party called at 7 to cancel. I took the note myself." She set the tray down on the service stand and looked at Thaddeus without blinking. "The table is open. He's a walk-in and we have a walk-in table. The table is being held in case they reconsider. Restaurants don't hold canceled tables as a policy." She said it evenly, without heat, like someone stating the temperature outside. "Unless the policy changed and no one told me." Thaddeus's voice dropped in the particular way that made things feel professional while being something else. "Margot, read the room." She looked at the room. Then she looked at Everett, not with pity, not with performance, but with the same flat directness she had used on Thaddeus. "This way," she said, and picked up a menu. Table 6 was not a good table. It was tucked behind the service corridor, half-shadowed by a structural column, close enough to the kitchen pass that every push of the swing doors sent a brief draft of steam across it. The chair nearest the wall had a leg that rocked slightly. Everett sat in it. Margot placed the menu in front of him. "The short rib is the best value. The halibut is overpriced for what it is. If you want something that won't make you regret coming in, order the soup and the bread service. That's my genuine recommendation, not the upsell." Everett looked down at the menu. Even the soup was more than the bills he'd brought. "I'm a little short," he said. She looked at him for a moment without expression. Then she took the menu back. "I'll see what's available from staff meal." "You don't have to do that, I know." She was already walking away. She came back 12 minutes later with a shallow bowl of white bean and roasted garlic soup, 2 slices of sourdough with a small pot of butter, and a glass of water that was not the sparkling water from the beverage menu, but plain filtered water, in a plain glass, and she set it in front of him with exactly the same care she had used for the 4-course tasting at table 2. "There's no bill for this," she said. "I want to pay for it. You can leave what you have, or don't. It came from staff meal and staff meal doesn't go on tabs." She tucked the napkin more squarely beside the bowl. "Eat while it's warm." She left before he could say anything useful. From table 6, Everett could see a cross-section of his restaurant he had never seen from a boardroom deck or a quarterly review. He watched a line cook rotate a shoulder twice between tickets, favoring it without meaning to. He watched a server named, according to her tag, Preethi receive a complaint from a table with the particular stillness of someone who had learned to absorb displeasure without flinching because flinching had consequences. He watched Thaddeus move through the room with the warmth of a man who understood exactly which guests mattered and applied that warmth accordingly. He watched 2 bussers share a single granola bar behind the service station, dividing it in half with the practiced precision of people who had been doing this for a while. None of this appeared in his operational reports. His reports told him about covers per night, and average spend per head and table, turn time, and waste percentage and labor cost as a share of revenue. His reports were precise and useful, and told him almost nothing about what was happening in this room. Margot came back to refill his water, which did not need refilling. "You look like you're memorizing the place," she said. "I was thinking about it. People who eat here don't usually think about it. They talk about themselves and occasionally compliment the lighting." He almost smiled. "Do you like working here?" She considered this with the seriousness of someone who did not waste consideration. "The kitchen is good. Some of the people are good. The pay structure has problems. She collected an empty bread plate from the adjacent table without pausing. The tip pooling policy was changed 8 months ago in a way that benefits management. Nobody argued because arguing has a cost. Her phone buzzed twice in her apron pocket. She ignored it. Then a third time, and she checked the screen with the practiced speed of someone managing something they could not put down. Whatever she read rearranged something in her face briefly before she put the phone away. "Everything all right?" Everett asked. "Family thing." She refilled the water. "My mom's in palliative at St. Paul's. My sister checks in at shift end." She said it the way people said things they had said many times, the information reduced to its practical form, the emotion filed somewhere else for later. "I'm sorry," Everett said. "People say that." She said it without cruelty. "It doesn't change the shift." She moved to the next table, and Everett sat with the soup and the things she had said. And he ate slowly, because there was nowhere else to be, and because the soup was better than anything on the menu, had a right to be given the plainness of its ingredients. And he understood that someone in that kitchen was cooking staff meal with the same attention they brought to the tasting menu. And that was not an accident of character. That was what happened when people were treated as if their hunger mattered. He was almost through the bread when Thaddeus appeared beside him with the particular ease of a man arriving at a decision he had already made. "I'll need to ask you to wrap up. We have a private event arriving at 9 and the room needs preparation." Everett looked at the clock above the bar. It was 8:14. "That's 45 minutes, he said. "The preparation requires the full room." Everett looked at the room, which showed no signs of requiring preparation. He looked at table 2, where a couple was finishing dessert. He looked at table 8, where 3 people were on their second bottle of wine. He said nothing. "I appreciate your understanding," Thaddeus said, in the tone that did not anticipate a lack of understanding. Margot's appeared at the service station. She had heard it, the controlled pretense of it, and Everett watched something move across her face and then settle into decision. "The private event is the Whitmore corporate booking," she said. "It's booked for the private dining room. The main floor isn't part of that booking." Thaddeus turned to her slowly. "I'll handle this, Margot. The main floor is open until 10. That's what the booking sheet says, and that's what he was told when he sat down." "Margot," his voice was quiet and without inflection, which was its own kind of volume. "This conversation is between me and the guest." She looked at Everett, then at the bowl, which was empty, then at Thaddeus. "He's finishing," she said. "He'll be done when he's done." The table near the window had gone quiet. Not the whole restaurant, just the 4 people close enough to understand that something was happening, which was not really about a table. Thaddeus said nothing more. He left with the air of a man recording things. Margot refilled the water one last time and did not look at Everett when she said quietly, "Take your time." He did. He sat at table 6 for another 22 minutes, and watched his restaurant, and ate the last of the bread and tried to count the number of small humiliations visible from this particular angle, this particular chair with the rocking leg, and lost count somewhere around 11. When he finally stood to leave, Margot was at the service station writing something in her order pad. She looked up. "Thank you," Everett said. She studied him for a moment. Something in his face must have seemed worth examining, because she looked at him longer than people in restaurants usually looked at the people they were serving. Then she said, "You shouldn't have to thank someone for being allowed to eat." He left through the front door and stood on Granville Street in the rain and the cold and the weight of what he had just understood. He had a car. He had a driver who was parked half a block away checking his phone. He could be back in Yaletown in 15 minutes, showered, in his own clothes, in his own kitchen, with its wolf range and its weinfungefridge and its complete absence of anyone who would ever tell him to wrap up. He stayed on the sidewalk for a while instead. The next morning, Everett Kane walked into his own office, on the 21st floor of a building in Cole Harbor, wearing a suit that had been dry cleaned, and not borrowed, from anyone, and carrying a coffee he had bought himself, at the place downstairs because he had not felt like having it brought to him. His director of operations, Wendy Tay, was waiting in the boardroom with a tablet and an expression that suggested she had prepared for this meeting by sleeping very little. He told her what he had seen. She did not look surprised. He asked her why she did not look surprised. "Because I wrote a memo 18 months ago," she said. "That described most of what you just told me. I sent it to you and to the previous COO. The COO responded. "You didn't." He asked her to pull the memo. She pulled it from a folder she had brought to the meeting. His signature was not on it. His name was not even in the reply chain. He had not read it. He had read, in that same week, a report about beverage sales and a proposal for a 5th location in Calgary. And somewhere between those two things, an 18-month-old memo about staff treatment had fallen into the void of an inbox that received 200 messages a day. He kept the memo in front of him and asked her to continue. The security footage from the previous 8 months showed a number of things. It showed Thaddeus directing host staff to guide certain guests. Guests who arrived without reservations. Guests who were visibly not dressed for the room. Guests whose appearance signaled what the internal training documents called low revenue probability, toward the exit before they could be seated. It showed a practice of applying service charges incorrectly in ways that reduced the portion reaching servers. It showed staff being timed on bathroom breaks. It showed Thaddeus, on 3 separate occasions, telling employees in private office meetings that their job office security was related to their willingness to prioritize brand experience, which appeared to mean the comfort of high-spending guests at the expense of everything else. Wendy slid a second folder across the table. "There's more." There was more. Everett read it with the particular feeling of a man who had built something and slowly allowed it to become something else by not looking at the place where it had changed. His phone lit up with an alert from the restaurant management system. Margot Beaulieu had been formally written up for insubordination. The write-up cited her interference in a guest management situation and her failure to follow the direction of senior staff. It had been filed at 7:46 that morning. Thaddeus had filed it the moment the restaurant opened. Everett stared at the name on the screen. He could call Thaddeus now. He could rescind the write-up, reinstate whatever informal discipline had followed last night, tell him that his employment was under review. He could make it stop in the next 4 minutes if he wanted to. Wendy watched him not make the call. "If you fire him and change nothing else," she said, "you'll have one less Thaddeus and the same system that made him successful. Someone else will fill the role in 8 months." He knew she was right. He had built a set of incentives and called them standards, and the standards had been met by people who were very good at meeting standards. And no one's bonus had ever depended on whether a cold person got a meal, and so no one had ever made that the priority, and it had compounded quietly for years while the reviews stayed excellent, and the revenue grew, and the awards accumulated, and no one had looked at the thing from table 6. He set the phone down without making the call. That evening, before he had decided exactly what he was going to do or, in what order, he drove to the address that had appeared in a staff file he had no business accessing and probably accessed anyway. He told himself he owed her something, and that the something should be delivered in person. Margot Beaulieu lived in a 2-bedroom rental in Mount Pleasant. The building had an intercom system with 3 buttons that didn't work and 1 that did. She came down to the lobby herself after he buzzed, wearing a sweatshirt and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and she stopped 2 steps from the bottom of the stairs when she saw him. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "You're not homeless." It was not a question. He said no. The lobby was small and lit by a single overhead fixture that hummed slightly. She looked at him in the humming light with an expression he could not immediately name. It was not the expression he had expected, which was anger. It was something slower and more considered than anger, and somehow that was harder to stand in front of. "Who are you?" she asked, he told her. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat down on the bottom step of the staircase. Not because she needed to sit down, but because the posture seemed to help her think. He waited. "I told you about my mother," she said. "I know. I told you about the tip structure. I know. You let me get written up. I didn't stop it in time. I should have. I'm sorry." She looked at the floor. "I don't actually know what you want from me right now." He said he wanted to make it right. He said the write-up would be rescinded and the practices that had led to it would be addressed. He said he had been wrong about a number of things and was trying to correct the list. He said it carefully and without excess, because he had learned something from the way she spoke, which was that plainness was a form of respect. She said, "Rescinding a write-up doesn't fix the reason it got filed." He said he knew. She looked at him again with that same slow consideration. "My mother's probably got 6 weeks. I've been picking up extra shifts to cover the hours I've been losing to the hospital." A pause. "Not because I wanted to tell you that. Just so you know what the context was when you were running your experiment." The word experiment landed correctly. He did not defend it. 3 weeks later, Everett Kane called a mandatory all-staff meeting at Kane and Harbor. All 4 locations sent representatives. The private dining room, which normally held 12 for corporate events, held 41 people standing between the tables. He did not stand behind the host station. He stood in the middle of the room, at table 6, because it seemed important to acknowledge where certain things had become clear. Thaddeus Rourke's termination had been processed 2 days prior, along with a detailed statement of cause that named the footage, the tip discrepancies, the fabricated write-ups, the scheduling violations. Everett read part of the statement aloud because he believed the staff deserved to hear it said plainly, rather than experience it as a rumor. Then he said the thing that was harder to say. Thaddeus Rourke had been very good at delivering the results that Kane and Harbor had rewarded. His performance reviews had been excellent. He had been promoted once and shortlisted for a second promotion. The system that had trained and promoted and rewarded him was a system Everett had built and maintained and failed to examine. Firing Thaddeus fixed the most visible symptom. Fixing this system was what he was here to talk about. He listed the changes: back pay for withheld and misallocated tips, immediate adjustment to the tip pooling policy with staff input on the new structure, protected break schedules, an independent HR reporting line that did not route through location managers, a new training module on guest conduct that removed the language of revenue probability from the vocabulary of hospitality, a standing policy, in writing, in every location. Anyone who came through the door hungry would be treated as a guest. He said the last one twice. Some people were quiet in the way of people hearing something they had been waiting to hear and not yet sure they believed. Some people were quiet in the way of people calculating what it would cost them if this turned out to be temporary. Both reactions seemed reasonable to him. Margot Beaulieu stood near the back of the room with her arms crossed and her face arranged in something that was not yet trust, but had stopped being refusal. After the meeting, he approached her. He did not offer a new title or a pay increase, because she had been very specific about not wanting those things as a transaction, and he was learning to take people at their word. He asked if she would be willing to be part of the working group reviewing the new tip policy. He said she did not have to, and that either answer would have no effect on her standing. She said she would think about it. He said that was fair. She looked at him the way she had looked at him from across table 6, that flat, careful look. You know that making it public was a risk for me. The write-up, the story, people knowing I was the one who served the CEO his charity soup. He said, you shouldn't have had to take that risk. No, she agreed. I shouldn't have. She went back to her section because she was on shift, because she still needed the hours. A reporter from the Vancouver Sun had the story within 48 hours. Everett did not know who had called, and he did not try to find out. When the reporter reached him for comment, he gave a full statement that did not use the words isolated incident or not representative of our values, or any of the other phrases companies reached for when they needed cruelty to sound like weather. A producer from a local morning show called about an interview. His publicist called about a different angle. His investors called about the share price effect on the proposed 5th location. He called Wendy TSE and told her to table the Calgary expansion indefinitely. In the months that followed, Kane and Harbor was not transformed. Transformation was the word journalists used because it had a clean shape and fit neatly into 800 words. What actually happened was slower and less satisfying and more real. Some managers adapted, some didn't and left. 2 locations saw short-term drops in revenue as the new guest policies adjusted the room's demographic. Everett watched the numbers without reversing the policies. A woman came in from the downtown east side on a Tuesday in January, her coat soaked through, and sat at table 6 because someone had told her it was kept for walk-ins and the staff would be kind. A server named Marcus, no, a server Everett didn't know yet, brought her soup without being asked and did not make it into a moment. She ate and left $4 because she had $4. Everett heard about it secondhand from Wendy, who had heard it from the kitchen manager, who seemed surprised it was worth reporting. That surprised him too, which told him there was more work to do. Margot joined the working group in February. She also started the restaurant management evening program at BCIT that spring, which she mentioned to Everett once and did not mention again until he asked. Her mother passed on a Thursday in March in the morning before Margot's shift. She came in anyway because she needed the hours and because, she said, keeping busy was the only thing that made the particular shape of that day survivable. He did not know what to say to that, which was perhaps the most honest position he had occupied in some time. They occasionally had coffee after working group sessions, in a place on Main Street with mismatched chairs and a counterperson who called everyone friend with a sincerity that could not be faked. They talked about the policy work and about the industry and about her mother and about his father, who had died 7 years ago, and who Everett thought about more often now than he had. In the years when he was too busy expanding, had started to ask himself what his father had actually meant by it. Margot said once that the thing she had always believed about hospitality was that it was just a specific application of attention, seeing someone and deciding that the seeing mattered. He said he thought his father would have agreed. She said, "The problem is you can't scale attention without losing what makes it attention." He didn't answer right away, because she was right and the rightness of it had implications he was still working through. One evening, late in April, he arrived at Canaan Harbor to find that someone had replaced the brass nameplate above the entrance. It still read Canaan Harbor, but below it, in smaller letters, was a new addition he had not authorized and did not ask to have removed. It read, "Everyone welcome. We mean it." He stood on the sidewalk in the April cold and read it twice, and felt something loosen in the part of him that had been holding something tight for a long time. He went inside and sat at table 6. The leg still rocked. No one had fixed it. He sat in it anyway, in the familiar wobble of it, and ordered the soup that was not from the menu, which they now offered openly as the house soup. The same recipe the kitchen had been making for staff for years, offered now to anyone who asked. It arrived in a plain bowl with 2 slices of bread and a small pot of butter and nothing more, and it was, as it had always been, the best thing on the table.